Hi, Mario. Welcome to Not Just Ads. And happy birthday, fifth birthday of the company you are CEO of, Peer
Oh, thank you.
39, a
Thank you.
contextual data platform. So, an expert in contextual. But by the way, before we start talking about degrees of separation,
Yeah.
I started my career in digital advertising and media at another company called iBlaster,
Oh, no
which
way.
then became MediaMind, which then became Seismic,
Yeah.
which bought Peer 39, if I'm not wrong, and then you bought
Yeah.
took Peer 39
After,
out,
yeah,
and that's
Seismic went
how
into
we are
bankruptcy.
related.
Yeah. Actually, we're probably more related because the early days of iBlaster were a direct competitor to a startup that I joined early on named Point Roll. So
Yes,
I'm sure we
yes.
probably ran into each other in the same halls of customers.
You see, and then in more recent times, I really enjoy talking to you about
Yeah, same.
everything contextual. And I would start focusing on a topic that is top of mind now, and
Sure.
is actually creating a lot of engagement, and it's brand safety.
Okay.
So I keep seeing reports, and I was at an event where Stagwell presented the future of news and a report where they ran across the UK and the US an audience survey, and they assessed reputational brand metrics
Hmm.
across these audiences, and they were purchase intent, favorability, cares about its customers, the
Yeah.
company
Yeah.
appearing in the ad, is a trustworthy company, offers good value to its customers, is a company I would want to work at, has the right values, has the quality product and services. And long story short, the CEO and chairman of Stagwell said this is the most boring report that I've ever seen, because actually kept giving the same result over and over and over again.
Yeah.
The ads adjacent to non-brand safe or considered not brand safe stories performed equally
Yeah.
to the ones considered brand safe stories.
Yeah.
What is your take on these and brand safety in general?
Those are a lot of questions and very, very big ones.
Yes.
So I hope the podcast is going to be about 4 hours because we could get into all of them. So, so one, I think the report that Stagwell had done and initiated is really important for the industry. I personally have worked in the premium news environment historically, so this one's pretty close to the chest. I think broadly, one of the things that we're seeing, and this is good for publishers that invest heavily in quality journalism or content, and is this is this kind of like return to thinking about either supporting quality journalism or quality content, or brands finally starting to evolve, let's say, their brand safety strategy to a more what we sometimes call the era of responsibility. And if you look at multinational brands or just brands in general, um, I think one of the things that has happened over the last couple of years is they've come to the understanding that the internet is basically funded by the media that they're invested. And where run, how they market, the data that's been used and is used is really important from the choices that they make. And this could be as broad as um, consumers being more aware of privacy considerations, to the content that they're running alongside of, to the media companies that they work on. And so as we continue to shift or evolve, I should say, from the audience only type of execution from a media perspective. I think things are coming into the picture for advertisers, right? That they're starting to say, hold on a second, audience matters, but where we reach them equally matter. And so when you start to think about the where, then that becomes a new set of signals, right? The easiest one is context and contextual. But what's also important is the what what is the content, what is the environment that the content is in? Is it a quality publishing entity? Is it a content rich environment? So the media company itself adds a lot of weight to the context, right? That you're delivering in. So, and it's from broadly from what we see that that framework of responsibility of where they're running and how they're running is really starting to take shape. And you're seeing it with what Stagwell is doing, as well as we're doing a lot of work across the advertising ecosystem to really help support that those types of strategies. And I think previously in the last couple of years, there wasn't an effort or initiative for it, and there wasn't signal for it. And now those signals are coming into the market, and that's it's an interesting use case for how the buy side is using context for that. But I didn't touch on the brand safety stuff. Do you want to jump into that
Sure.
as well?
No, I mean, you have mentioned something that really resonates.
Where
The
yes,
ads, yes, where the where matters. So hooking up on brand safety, should we have the same kind of approach to brand safety in the open marketplace versus quality media environments? So but
yeah.
the question that I constantly asking myself, for example, is brand safety at domain level
Yeah.
or at page level?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have from both the publisher and the advertiser side is that publishers are producing, especially the quality and premium publishers are producing an enormous amount of quality content, and oftentimes the tools that are being used to accomplish, let's say, brand safety or brand suitability, are being used with legacy practices. And they, just in the conversations that we've had, I'm sure you have a lot of conversations too. It's like everybody uses a keyword list and no one updates it in 10 years. And and I'm sure a lot of people that listen to this podcast from the publisher side is like that's the biggest thorn in the side. So so I think from a practice perspective, let's start broadly and we'll go in. The practice perspective, you need to start thinking about the nuances of what I would call brand safety. Now, one thing for publishers that they have to make sure that they there's an understanding, and I think this doesn't get talked about that much, and I'd be interested in your thoughts, is everyone's looking for relevance, right? So from that perspective, sometimes brand safety is used on audience targeting simply because they don't feel certain environments are not, I wouldn't say safe or suitable, but just maybe not relevant, right? So, so I think publishers have to think about those kind of things. It's because what may be relevant for a CPG company marketing diapers for kids is not going to be the same thing for an automotive advertiser. So I think those are things that kind of need to be talked a little bit about. But as it relates to your specific question, when you get into like the details, right, from an execution standpoint, there's I want to address your question first. There are different signals for let's say, the domain and the page, right? And page is super important when you're considering brand safety, because there's a lot of advancements on understanding page level content, as well as things that are happening in CTV and in mobile apps. But there's also signal that are about the domain, right? So, for example, there may be a publisher that does a lot of misinformation, and there are companies that help advertisers avoid that, and that's good for the industry because that will redirect spend and programmatic demand to quality, quality publishing. I think where things get really, really important to start to consider, around brand safety is you need to put the content in context. And I know that may sound a little weird to say, right? But
No, it's fundamental.
it really is fundamental, because right now the majority of like the legacy brand safety tactics may include a list of keywords, and that list of keywords is applied to every piece of media that they buy for display. CTV and mobile apps work a little bit differently, but the where we see things going is some of those keywords may be okay if they're in the right context, right? So they may not want to run on a certain set of keywords if they're out in the wild, but if they came up on a news organization, that would be fine, right? And those types of nuances aren't as broadly practiced as they should, and those are things that I think we need to do a better job of. I think GARM started to go down this route. And what we saw with the brand suitability framework was that if you had different levels of your risk profile by what is known by the industry as either the 11 or 12 standard brand safety categories, right? There was a considerable amount of inventory that would be opened up across the news environment. And so I think that kind of leads us into a need for the market that gives publishers and the advertising, the demand side, really a base to have different conversations and different types of controls, so that it's not something that someone logs into their DSP and then universally blocks, right? They could say this is okay if it's in this environment, right? And that's really important, because as people start to do more with quality journalism, or they want to support more news has a lot of sensitive content, right? So those are kind of some of the things that need to happen, that are starting to happen, that may not be as well known for. I mean, if you go to news specifically, that's an important area for people to understand the technical execution components.
Very, very, very important. And also, it's very important to understand that it's not a black or white, because it seems that it's just invest more in news media. Well, that's not how it works. It's not only a switch. It's about working
No,
together.
yeah.
And
So
so
I'll give you a couple. I'll give you some really some other really specific examples, right? And I think this happens a lot. There may be a contingent of let's say news publishers that will go out to the market and say, we've packaged up um, a deal ID or a PMP or something, and this consists of 500 news publishers that are premium quality. We've pre-scored it for brand safety and everything else. And so they push that out, and then advertisers start to buy it and so forth. What doesn't happen is the brand safety controls in the DSP that the advertisers have universally across the globe aren't necessarily released. So what happens is publishers put this inventory in, they have expectations of a certain amount of demand. Advertisers have expectations of a certain amount of purchasing going on, but there's stuff that's being blocked because of the lack of nuance in control. So one of the things that we do, and I've been doing more so with the demand side, is to give the advertisers that want to support these organizations the ability to set controls at their DSP to say, these are my brand safety settings, but I don't need them applied to these types of degrees in certain media PMPs or deals or inventory sources. And that's really important because a lot of people forget that, and they don't, and publishers don't know what's happening. And the advertisers, when it gets into like the Twitter level, they're not making those changes. So all those entities need to talk to each other about that.
And what can a media owner do to avoid that, to double check that?
Well, there's basically two ways to do that. If you're a media owner and you've made something available to to an advertiser to buy through their DSPC, there's one way that they will build in their own brand safety controls, or they will have the advertiser remove them. Removing them completely is not something that anyone is going to be comfortable with, period. Right? Because, if you're a Pampers, advertiser, you don't want to run on something that may be really super sensitive around kids or, whatever it may be. Right. So there's always going to be some controls. Now, what they can start to do is start to ask them what type of levels of risk they're associated with, or what type of controls that they are putting on that can reduce the blocking, I would say. And I would have your media owner, I would have them talk to their trading or media clients about those new sets of controls. And contextual partners are like us are really adapted, helping in that environment, because that's super important, because then you'll be able to, for like, to be specific, is not overblock the inventory, right?
Sure. And the second thought that I had with your last concept is also the environment.
Yeah.
So it's easy to go into the open marketplace and say, oh, this happened to me and that happened to me, and my pages are blocked. And well, it happens to any human being that goes into a very dodgy area versus the high street, as an example. So, I mean, you need to be prepared to whatever you will find in a certain environment. And I am a big advocate, first, for media alliances, and second, as a next best thing to of curated marketplaces.
Yeah.
How do you see context in that?
With respect to the curated marketplaces?
Curated marketplaces, and in like, or with a broader description, quality media environment.
It's so when I was reading the notes of the that we were sharing before, I think one of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is the role of context has definitely moved beyond the legacy consideration. And so what do I mean by that specifically? I mean, if there was an automotive manufacturer and they were selling trucks, and they thought that men of a certain demographic was their target audience that watch sports, they would buy a bunch of ESPN, and that's their contextual type of strategy. Coming back to what we were talking about the where, the role of context, the definition has changed, right? Because it's not just the words on the page. There's certainly been an evolution, and new technologies have helped out with different ways to analyze content and so forth. But there's also two other areas that are becoming more important in context, is around the where, is like, what is the aboutness of the page, right? Or what is the aboutness of the website or app or CTV? And so what I mean by that specifically is there may be different levels of, I would say, technical components like quality measures, right? Is it are there pages with a lot of ad clutter, or is it a premium page with one or two ads, or they're big, where are they located, and things of that nature. And then there's all these other new signals which look at content ratios. Like, is there more content in ads, or the picture density and things of that nature. And then you have things like, what is the aboutness of the actual media property, right? Is it a quality news journalism? Is it a blog? Is it UGC? Is it professionally produced? And we see that a lot in CTV, believe it or not. There's a lot of unprofessional type of channels coming out. And so there's the role of context of assessing the where is broadening out. And then the other third vector that we see coming in is privacy centric geo location, which indexes zip codes, postal codes of sort. Because like if you think about like where, it's like, where are you, what environment you're in, and is it cluttered or easy? And those are kind of like three things that I think every advertiser is considering. So when you flip that over to curation, there's kind of like two ways that people are doing this, right? There's one way which advertisers are using their DSPs to have different controls to curate what they want to buy. But then you have media alliances that are curating packages, and they are starting to use more of these broad contextual environments that say, okay, maybe there's a technology company that's advertising for AI. They want to be on business content, right? But they don't want to be in a cluttered environment, and they want to be in deep, on pages or publishers that have high content to ad ratios. And then maybe for AI, there's kind of like three different environments of AIs. One's saving the world. One's just kind of talking about it and like, the sentiment's kind of neutral. And then the other is, they're coming for jobs. And, so when you think about how the curation side is doing it or how the demand side is doing it, those types of controls are feeding how things are being curated, either from the demand or from the media alliances and publishers.
And in between the lines you made,
Yeah.
without naming them, you mentioned a lot of the characteristics of MFA websites and apps.
Yeah.
What's your latest assessment of the area, and also it would be interesting if you could give some tips to media owners on how not
Yeah.
to be
Not how
seen
not
as
to be
MFAs.
MFA. So this is a little bit of a lightning rod because there's not necessarily a defining standard, right? Now, if in the context of MFA, it this may be a little bit of a lightning rod to say, the standard of viewability may be the root cause of why MFA kind of started. And when we first started doing MFA and we started to do a lot of research around it, there were some really interesting learnings that we found. One being that MFA environments routinely were recognized as the highest viewability environments, routinely seeing 80 or 90%. Now, it doesn't matter that they had 10 ads all jammed at the top of the page, right? But when we started to look at how attention signals were coming in, it was really quite bad. So those are some really interesting learnings that we've seen with MFA. Now, my take on MFA is it's a quality control, right? And if you're a publisher, my advice to the publishing community is that the buy side is taking a lot of measures to make sure that they are running on premium and quality environments for their campaigns that want that. Now, at the same point, there may be a lot of DR advertisers that don't care, right? So if you're a publisher and you want to have, let's say, more ads on a page, I would be smart about the content that you are putting those ads against. So, for example, um, if you're a publisher that may have what we call like lower funnel activity, like reviews of products, pricing, like how to buy something, where to buy something, those kind of things, that may be okay to have more, more ads on a page because the consumer kind of feels like I want to see the options, right? And we've actually seen some decent performance on that side. But for like more of your content rich environments that are not lower funnel, like lifestyle content or sports or what have you, I would just be mindful that the type of advertising that is going in those environments are generally, they're not as heavy DR, they're more brand or brand health type of campaigns and things of that nature. So quality environments matter. So if I'm a publisher, I'm thinking about what type of advertising is going to be really good on this type of content, whether it's, it could be, CTV, mobile or web. And then I would really start thinking about like how you want to dynamically work with the advertising experience on that page versus something that may be a little bit lower, lower funnel. Now that being said, out in the wild, we see so we basically see every open programmatic ad call across the globe, and across the globe, the average is about, I think, 12% of the open market, or just any inventory is about is made for advertising. And what's really important for made for advertising from the advertiser side is that this is done at a page level and not a domain, because what we've seen from the bad actors, and publishers should be aware of this, is that towards the end of a quarter, when people want to make their number from a publisher, they'll start flooding ads, right? And so we actually see some publishers that are not, have high indexes for MFA to be classified by their pages that have a lot of ad clutter, and there's other metrics that go into it. So from the advertiser side, the initiative is to make sure that things are on the page level, because there's too many dynamics that are changing there. So from the publisher side, I would just be mindful of the
tactics.
the tactics. So that's kind of how we see that evolving. But it's quickly moved to be just like, I would say, like the 11 or so brand safety categories are something that people generally will select as standards that the IAB and Garmin put out. MFA is another one, like misinformation and things of that nature. So if you're a publisher, I would just be mindful of the tactics and the environments and things of that nature. So.
But when you mention that, I also, it makes me think, and maybe I'm jumping on laterally, is in an ideal world where you have the top 100 media owners in the country, and saying top 100 maybe is not even the right, because is not about reach, and quality of content is also subjective.
Yeah.
But let's say the top 100 in terms of standards, a transparent walled garden of standards.
Yeah.
Would brand safety even be needed once you know the names, the faces, and the phone numbers of all these publishers, people?
I get it. So the way I'm going to answer that question is, I think the definition of brand safety has to be like redefined, right? So because if you just look at the top, let's say the top one, which for the sake of the argument, you have the top 100 publishers, and that's all. Let's say everybody's gonna buy. Let's say, for example, or that's an advertiser, right? Um, the idea of safety, like, is your brand protected from unsafe environments? So it could be misinformation or fraud or things like that. Those types of tactics that have traditionally been under brand safety are you're probably not needed. Now, what is needed though is if an advertiser is buying across, let's say, these top 100 and they're doing audience targeting, right? They would want to use contextual controls to make sure they're running on environments that are suitable. So that could be used by way of targeting or avoidance, right? And it's no different than an automotive manufacturer, again, like what we were talking about before, concentrating on sports, but they want to avoid cooking content or restaurant content, right? So as a publisher, like, are you going to be offended that,
Yeah.
So I think you can put that under like suitability and contextual control.
Yes.
But I
It's
think,
almost strategical.
yeah. So like, do you need MFA protections on top 100 if they're assuming that they're not MFA and they're not doing?
Yes.
No, probably not. But do you need suitability controls? Because it all comes down to performance, right, Alessandro? Like, if you're an automotive manufacturer and you're finding a lot of success in sports, and you find that you're running on a lot of lifestyle and it's not working, well, you want to avoid that. So I wouldn't call that
Oh,
safety.
well, yeah,
You know what I
sure.
mean?
But it's not even avoidance. Is just having a strategy on where your
Right.
message should run, and what type of audience should interact with.
Right. And that's where I think a lot of the work is happening right now with using the where as a component to your measurement and insights, because once you clean up the space, and you can do that by media alliances, or a lot of people still run on a lot of different websites. They'll use companies like ours to avoid the like really unsafe or misinformation or fake, whatever it may be. Once that's done, then it's all, you have to make sure you're finding relevant, or by whatever KPI that you're looking for, and that's where the contextual thing has evolved, right? It's like, what's working, what is the where component of the who. That's probably where I think I'm personally most excited about.
And I am too. And I think it's very powerful, and also sends a powerful message also to media owners. It's not just about advertisers not blocking them, it's also about them deciding where they want to sit in a digital advertising ecosystem.
Yeah. And I think we may get into this later, but I think one of the challenges that we have in that kind of context, no pun intended, is like where things are working and where relevance is that there is still an overweight from the buying platforms to focus on environments that are connected via cookies and so forth. And so one of the things that I think this broader contextual use case of like performance and insights is really going to start to help publishers is to be really specific as non-cookie browsers like Safari. Like, it blows my mind how much media we see running on Chrome versus Safari, given the iPhone audience. And when you really ask, it's just cookies and optimization to measurement.
I think we had a couple of conversations about this in the past,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. It's mind blowing, and I think that is behind that there is a much more worrying element, which is a certain part of attack directing their narratives towards what makes them money and their own business models. So I cannot track it. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So, and by doing that, we had also other people following other parts of the industry following this narrative, and then looking at Chrome, looking at Android, and leaving out one of the wealthiest
I
audiences
know it must
in the
drive
entire internet, the Apple.
your publisher clients crazy. It drives our
Yes,
publisher clients crazy. Um, and it's tough. It's tough when you have a system that is I don't want to say incentivized because it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily that's the right word. It's just this is how it operates still, and so where I think like curation is helping is packaging up broader contextual, using context to feed these curated packages. And I think a lot of the work we're seeing that we're collaborating with on the buy side to understand how context can also work in non-cookie environments should help. But cookies aren't going away yet, so we're still going to be in this gray zone for a while, right?
and let's jump on into another gray zone, because I was recently at another event on
Yeah,
CTV,
yeah,
and I don't remember the exact figure, but I remember a consumer brand, saying 50% of our spend. I don't know where it ended up.
yeah.
So what is your perception of CTV, and what is contextual like in CTV?
Yes. CTV is a fascinating um, subsector, right? Because it's new, and you basically have two environments of almost two separate marketplaces. If you're asking me to define it, there is the top advertisers, right? That could be the top three, four, 500. I don't really have any uh, specific data on that. Um, it basically comes down to those that have enough marketing weight to do upfronts, right? And those types of relationships are done through primarily programmatic guaranteed environments, and they're set up and they run. What's starting to happen now is that there is a good number and a lot of new CTV channels coming in, fast services and so forth, right? And these companies are bringing to market um, a lot of innovation or data or pricing or whatever it may be. But generally, what they're feeding as a collective is this concept that when people buy CTV, they are generally digital natives and they want to use more data to optimize to get better ROI. Now, a lot of CTV is definitely blind, and some publishers hold sending signal because they want people to buy things directly, right? But we're starting to see a shift now of more advertisers asking either on their upfronts or more advertisers buying across large environments of biddable inventory. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say not necessarily like complete open market, but they're organizing, direct PMPs on large amounts. Now, the way that CTV works is you have a publisher, you have a service, and you have all these different entities in the middle, and there are different relationships, business relationships, with what can be shared and what cannot be. And then in addition to that, there are different, um, the standards for CTV may not be followed as universally with how people are sharing what type of content that's on there, that the bid call has. So what you're left with is the advertising community running on CTV inventory that may only be 10% transparent and they don't know what to do, right? And publishers, and this is the other problem, publishers saying, well, I'm sharing all this. I'm sharing content and what it is, what type of content it is. And but that's not making its way through to the primary platform that the advertisers are buying on. So you have this broad range of like transparency issues. Now, not to be a commercial, but this is something that we saw very specifically because we make sense of the noise of like what's the channel, what's the content, and making sure that whatever publishers are passing through are making its way so that buyers can find that inventory. And I'll give you a case in point. Like like I'll give you an example. Like one publisher may be known for primarily recipes, right? So from an advertiser, when they want to find cooking content, they're going to buy that type of inventory. Now, if that publisher is sending, and we're working with them, what we will make available, to the marketplace is their inventory will now be classified to say maybe they have 30% of their inventory as home and design. And so that type of contextual setting is not making its way through. So, so real publishers from that perspective make sure that gets through, and they can capture more demand and so forth. But there's also a ton of other things that are going on in CTV with respect to.
And I actually wonder if we are making the same mistakes over and over again. So we are repeating the same mistakes that we did that we made on traditional display.
Yeah.
And those that have made a lot of money lurking in murkiness in the traditional display. Now that traditional display is cleaning it up, they are trying to do the grab and run also on other newer areas.
Yeah, I think you and I both have been in this space long enough that there's always going to be I don't know if I want to say shenanigans, but like there's always going to be yeah. All right. Well, your podcast is going to get labeled for not safe for work now. Unfortunately, but not unfortunately, it's that role, like we talked about, like the where that really matters in CTV, because what is coming into the CTV ecosystem, there are a lot of different environments, right? Like there are environments that, let's say, I don't know, you could be home and you wanted to have, a wallpaper up, right? Or maybe your kids want to play a game that's available through your connected television. Like there's a lot of that's coming in, and unfortunately that is advertisers are running on those types of things and not necessarily running next to streaming content. So the where is really important, to help from the advertiser side redirect that to the premium streaming environments that matter most. But to your point, there's always going to be quality. It's advertising, right? And this, the way that programmatic works is it's not necessarily a free market, but like there's a lot of market opportunity. So you're always going to need to have some level of awareness of where you're running, right?
Let's end with a personal question. It's not a personal question, actually, but I want to ask an opinion on a personal pet obsession of mine.
Okay.
Which is brand safety is a two-way issue. In the digital advertising world, we see it as one-way issue. So it's the worry of the advertiser that wants brand safety where their ads end up. What we rarely or less often consider is the brand safety and the reputation of the media owner towards the ads that are appearing on their pages. How do you see it? I was about to ask you, is there a way for you to expand your business? Because
I think it's all about experience, right? Like if you are, I think publishers should think about they should think about their reader in the context of coming to, their article, right? And what does their paid app or CTV, what does that say? what type of experience do you want to have? Like, do you want to have relevant advertising, and that could be degraded if you have 3 or 4 ads from maybe unknown advertisers that are saying the wrong things. That I don't know. Maybe the advertising is divisive. So I I think it all like as if you're a publisher, it is not an easy job, right? But it's definitely a two-way street. In that there are advertisers worry about the placement, but then from the publisher side, and there are controls with their SSP and exchange partners. It's like what type of advertising is coming through, because from a publisher perspective, that could do the same thing that the advertisers are worried about for the publishing brand, right? So, I mean, I'm sure you see it too with some, the
Yes,
publishers that you look at,
and often.
and often, like you go to read an article and you're like, all the, do I need the belly fat ads? Like
But at the end of the day, it goes back to what you first said. It is
yeah,
the where that it counts
yeah,
on both sides.
yeah, yeah. I think that's
And
an important
so,
piece.
Mario, thank you very
Oh, this was
much.
great. Thank you so
And
much for having me.
can I just say, for the first time we spoke, I thought that your background was a fake one. No, congratulations for that fantastic room.
It's I've been lucky. COVID was lucky. I was lucky to have a good space. The only challenge is the air conditioning doesn't work in this room. So in the summer it's a little hot. But
We
yeah,
will fix it. We will fix it for the next time
yeah, that'd be
so that
great.
we have a perfect context for the conversation.
Alessandro, thank you so much. I love what you do, and you're always thoughtful about the industry and everything that you write for in the Ad Exchange articles and everywhere else. And it was really a pleasure and an honor to be on with you, and enjoyed it a lot.
Likewise. Thank you, Mario.
Thank you.